Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me here today. Appreciate you being here. If you will, like, share, comment on the post. And then if you are in a situation where you are able, if you want to follow along, we will be in Genesis chapter 3, beginning in verse number 7. And we will be traveling down to verse 13 today. And I'm not going to read all that for time, but the general story, is we begin to see the consequences of sin. The woman here says she sees that this tree is good for food and a delight to the eyes, and would make one wise. Now, I suppose the first thing we should debate here is our definition of wise. What being wise meant. So she takes the fruit, she gives some to Adam, he eats, and then it says that their eyes were opened. Their eyes were open. They realized that they were naked, and they ran and hid themselves. And we see that confrontation then as God comes to them and he asks them, "What have you done? What's going on here? What's the change?" And what I kind of want to zero in on here today, and I don't have time this morning. There's a lot there, obviously, that we could probably drill down and concentrate on these verses for a lengthy time. And just got almost word for word here in what goes on in these verses. But the overall picture of what happens in these verses is we see the consequence of sin made very clear to us. Difficult for us to imagine. I know I can't. Maybe you have a far better imagination than I do, but I cannot even begin to imagine a world with no sin, a world with no evil. But that was what Adam and Eve had been enjoying up until this moment. A world free of sin, a world free of suffering, a world free of evil and wickedness. Imagine turning on your evening news and there was no bad, and the commentator comes on and says, "Folks, we don't have anything to report today. Nothing bad happened all day long, just like yesterday." And that kind of world is hard for us to even begin to comprehend that kind of time. But that is exactly where Adam and Eve were. They were living in a world that was perfect, surrounded by perfect, everything about it perfect. But then we have this day, the day when sin enters the world. And it is the end, as we saw in the previous passage, of that perfection. And immediately we begin to see the consequences of sin. This is not something, I think that's a very important thing to notice. They didn't eat the fruit and then a year later begin to deal with consequences. They had consequences immediately from their sin. It started right out within that first crunch, with that first bite. They began to have consequences. It came in. It crushed them, their image of themselves, their relationship with God. We see here immediately they recognized that they were naked and they were embarrassed by that. They realized that they were imperfect. They realize, the situation. We see then that from there they begin the attempt, the effort to hide their sin. They sew these fig leaves together to cover themselves. Verse 8 says, when they hear God, they go and hide from Him. Imagine that transition from from however long, we're not sure how long creation, how long Adam and Eve had been there to this point, but all along, I'm sure that it looks something like a lot of children when parents come home from work and they run the door to meet them or run out across the yard and jump in their arms. That when God would come down to meet with them, they'd run looking for him. They probably knew about what time he would come, and they sat waiting on him. But on this day, it says they ran and hid. Obviously, they're now separated from God. They have broken God's heart, going against His this plan, and they have now established, and they have broken this arrangement that God had and established what we could call, I guess, a new world order, all because of sin. And this is, I think, a good example for us because, and a good lesson for us to use to teach others. Because a lot of times I'll hear people say, "Well, that's not that big a sin." Well, it was just a little, little sin, a little white lie. You know those phrases. It was just a piece of fruit. It was just a piece of fruit. It's so insignificant that we don't even know what kind of fruit it is. You often hear people talk about the apple. The Bible doesn't say it was an apple. We don't even know. It was so insignificant that we don't even know the name of the fruit. But what was significant was the sin that it involved. And you and I, to deceive ourselves into thinking that even little sin doesn't have consequences, is foolishness. We see the consequences for Adam and Eve. We see the consequences for all of mankind. Another thing to think about that sin. Adam and Eve never dreamed. If you would have asked them if taking this one little piece of fruit would affect man for thousands of years to come, they would have never believed it. We never know the impact of our sin. Who will be hurt by our sin? And so this passage, this story, just teaches us a lot of things. Tells us a lot about how things are, but specifically this morning, I just want to focus on and get you to think about that one thing: is to consider and think about, to remember, all sin has consequences. All sin carries with it shame and guilt. All sin carries with it punishment. And again, the worst thing is we don't even know the far-reaching implications, repercussions of that sin. Something to think about. You have a good day. We'll see you here tomorrow morning.